Whether you're a Sooners fan or just love college football, you'll want to keep it locked in here over the next several weeks. Jason's going to join us to preview positions across the board, offense, defense, for Oklahoma as they get to camp here in mid-March. They've not announced a date yet. And we also have Jason on board anytime there's some breaking news, as was the case today with a tight end commit for 22.
Yeah, Oklahoma got a tight end commitment from Aledo, Texas. Jason Llewellyn, about a 6'4", 6'4", 6'5", 240 tight end. Interestingly enough, 247 doesn't have him ranked, which is very odd. Typically, the only time that happens if we have a kid reclassify or something like that. But Rivals has him as a 3-star. Really good blocker. Decent hands out of the backfield in terms of from a tight catching the ball out of the backfield. I think he had 40-something catches for over 400 yards in 2020 and a little bit of obviously a strange season, but really a position of need for Oklahoma at the tight end position. They're a little thin. They have Jalen Conyers, who was a tight end who was there last year, 2019 commit. He transferred off to Arizona State. So really a position that Lincoln Riley and Oklahoma needed on the offensive side of the ball. That they're a little bit thin at, so good. And I think Oklahoma fans will notice that Aledo connection. Oklahoma case Jace McClellan committed to Oklahoma, then decommitted, then went to Alabama. So maybe Oklahoma's mending some fences there in terms of those recruiting ties. So really good get for Oklahoma. Like I said, it's not moving the needle from a rankings perspective. So just because he's not rated yet, but it remains to be seen how that'll go as obviously as he starts his 2020 season.
So as seriously as some college football fans take these recruiting rankings, they almost see that as a negative. But if he turns out to be a really good football player, let's not worry about the recruiting rankings. And keep in mind, I was talking to 247 Sports guys from Ohio State and Michigan just in the last week where they had received commitments as well, where guys just had dashes across the board and didn't have rankings. And I'm like, this is Ohio State and Michigan. What's up there? And they said, the rankings are coming. They just have, as you mentioned, they just have to cycle through and catch up with those guys, and that will happen.
That's right.
All right. Let's talk some quarterback play. Spencer Rattler, we've talked about him a number of times. I know that there are some recent sports books that came out with Heisman Trophy odds, and he was prominent in those. I didn't check him out specifically, but I know he's near the top. Just a dynamic athlete, quarterback who really developed as the entire team did throughout the 2020 season.
Yeah, we've talked about this several times, Mark, but it was very clear to see his maturation as the season went on, particularly the back half of the season. 28 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 6 rushing touchdowns, about 68% completion percentage. Really good overall from a redshirt freshman perspective. So only would see his trajectory go up a little bit. You would think a couple of things that certainly he'll get an opportunity to work on through. What he'll get is through a spring, obviously in the fall, and I think something has to be said for that. Not necessarily just for Rattler's perspective, but everybody across the board. Especially younger kids coming into programs, Oklahoma or wherever it might be, not getting a spring practice last year and getting kind of more of an abbreviated fall practice. So I think that'll speak dividends for kids that are in their second year in the program, multiple year in the program, just that maturation. But yeah, I think a lot of pundits will have him as one of the top 1 or 2 Heisman contenders to begin the season. If for nothing else, the amount of talent that has left college football from last year, particularly at the quarterback position. So I think it speaks volumes to not only what Oklahoma has done at the quarterback position, but certainly how good of a prospect and how good of a player Spencer Rattler can be.
10 touchdowns, 1 interception over the final 4 games. That Oklahoma State game in particular, at a time when it looked like the Cowboys were playing the best football in the conference, and Oklahoma, I think that was the game, even though they were improving throughout the season, where they let down the statement against a quality opponent to say, no, we're the best team in the conference, and it's not even that close, where they really laid it to Oklahoma State. And certainly Rattler had a really nice game in that one. 4 touchdowns, no picks, 301 yards passing, but supported by a great defensive effort and running game. The rest of the quarterback room, how does that stack up? Tanner Mordecai is gone, correct?
Yeah, so there's a lot of moving parts that Oklahoma's had in the quarterback room. To your point, Tanner Mordecai is gone. He has gone to SMU. And then they also had another defection that went over to TCU. So Oklahoma has had an opportunity to reload the quarterback room, so to speak. So Caleb Williams is obviously the big recruit, 5-star guy that will come in and it compete, at least at a very high level, in terms of what Riley's going to say. You're going to get the coach speak from Riley every single year on the quarterback competition. Even if it's not a competition, he's going to make everyone in the media try to believe that, and probably more importantly, everyone in the locker room believe that. Caleb Williams he's the real deal. Number 6 overall commitment in the 2020 class, number 1 rated quarterback overall, 6'1", 220. He's got the build. He's more of a dual threat guy than what Spencer Rattler is. Uses his legs sub 4.6 in the 40. Like I said, great arm. He makes a little bit more plays with his legs than Rattler does. And I think the one knock on him, if you're nitpicking him coming in at the high school level, is he's had some trouble getting off of his primary receiver when his primary receiver is covered, going through the progression. He struggles with that a bit. He tends to leave the pocket a little bit early. Very reminiscent of what Kyler Murray was when he came to Oklahoma from Texas A&M. He was very much in the same mold. Riley got a couple of years with him. Obviously, you saw how that kind of panned out. So I think you'll certainly see Caleb Williams in a backup role. I don't think he'll redshirt. He'll probably play in enough games to utilize that year of eligibility. Now, the other guy that's really kind of a wild card is Micah Bowens. He's a transfer, not really a grad transfer, but he's a second-year transfer from Penn State to 2019 class from Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas, number 15 or 16 overall quarterback in that class. Very much a dual threat, from a measurable perspective. Again, we'll remind Oklahoma fans when they get to see him here in the spring. We'll remind Oklahoma fans of Kyler Murray, just the shiftiness out of the backfield from a quarterback perspective. 5'11", a little bit shorter than Rattler and Caleb Williams, but went to Penn State last year, didn't really play a whole lot, then was a very quick transfer to Oklahoma, transferred within about 5 days of really entering into the portal for Oklahoma. So those are your 3 main guys, really, from a scholarship perspective. Certainly, you would see Caleb Williams and Micah Bowens really kind of battling for that backup spot. Would be surprising to see Caleb Williams be unseated. You got to think that he'll be primed for the backup role just because of the talent that he brings in. But Micah Bowens was very clear when he came in. He didn't come here just to kind of hold a clipboard and learn. He wanted to compete for that job as quickly as possible. And he's a younger kid. He's a sophomore, so he'll have that opportunity to certainly compete for that backup role this year, and then see what happens next year. I think in a perfect world, you would like to see Rattler have a great year, possibly go to the NFL, maybe set up the time for Caleb Williams, because some of those younger kids now, they don't like to wait, especially the highly rated kids. The transfer portal is the new free agency, so you don't see them moving, you don't see them sticking around for a couple of years. So all that'll play out how it might, certainly throughout the end of the year, through the balance of the year. But I think that's the plan that most people, most Sooner fans, most media think will play out if Rattler has the type of year that you would expect from a freshman to a sophomore year. And just from a depth perspective, Oklahoma got a couple of preferred walk-ons just to kind of help from that quarterback room depth perspective. So Ben Harris and Ralph Rucker, 2 names you're probably not going to hear a whole lot about, but just from a practice squad perspective and just from a depth perspective, are 2 guys that will certainly provide that depth overall in the quarterback room.
2 points here. One, I've always been just interested to a certain extent, or wondered why, like the last 2 guys that you just mentioned, you're going to Oklahoma, probably one of the top 3 quarterback rooms in the country.
Yeah.
I just, if you're good enough to play in the practice squad at Oklahoma, but never see the field, you can probably go to Fresno State or somewhere and be the starting quarterback. I just, I can't relate to that mentality, but everybody's got their own preferences. And
sure.
And so that just interests me to a certain extent. Why would you want to be the fourth or fifth quarterback, regardless of the elite status of that particular football program? But that's
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a fair point. I think the thing that maybe be enticing for some of those kids is maybe they take a year or two to learn, to get better under Riley. And to your point, maybe it's more of a mid-major transfer, like a Tanner Mordecai, like a Chandler Morris that we mentioned off the top. Going to not TCU, certainly not a mid-major. SMU is, but maybe put some of those kids in a better position to be to go to a mid-major or a small Power 5 school.
And then the second part of that is that you mentioned that these athletes just don't typically want to wait anymore, and then they're going to leave like they have in the past, where they would sit for 2 years, and then even a really top-notch quarterback out of high school would sit and become the starter maybe as a junior if he had to wait in line behind another talented guy that was moving on to the NFL. But I just don't remember seeing these waves and waves of quarterbacks on these rosters. And Georgia, Ohio State, and Oklahoma come to mind first and foremost. Is just having layers of high 4 and 5-star guys just in the same quarterback room. It just seems crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. I mean, I saw an article. I mean, it's kind of on the same trajectory as talking about the transfer portal, that there's so many kids in the transfer portal. There's not enough scholarships to go around. So there's going to be, I know this year was a little bit different. There's more transfers in the COVID year that maybe we've seen in the past, just because of the fact that some might be able to get to be eligible immediately because of what happened. But yeah, I think there's such an influx in talent at certain schools that it's I think some of the knock on college football is, it's the same teams over and over every single year. And, there's a reason why, right? Because they put out some of the best players in the country. They're sending people to the NFL, but, it's a good place. I mean, you never see Alabama. They don't hardly ever have any turnover. Kids will wait 3 and 4 years to play there, which is strange. So, yeah, there's an influx in talent at those schools, without a doubt.